No one elected Elon Musk to nothing.
You want to use our money to go to Mars? No. We want to use our money right here in Washington, D.C.
Zach Abraham, welcome to Doge Watch, our first episode of many more, I think.
This is like Christmas every day to me.
Oh, I'm like hanging out with me and talking about Doge is like Christmas?
No, just yeah. Well, yeah,
Oh.
yes. Yes, you're at the no, but the Doge. I just love this Doge stuff. First of all, it scratches an itch that I feel like that is like itched my entire life that you just can't get. You know, where you're like, I want some accountability. I want people to understand how ridiculously wasteful our government is. And you know, you're still going to have those people that that don't care because they're, you know, intellectually captured or whatever. But for the rest of us, it's incredible. It makes you feel not crazy, right? Like to see it. And you're just like, yes, I knew there was ridiculous waste going on. And here's the proof.
Well,
so I love it.
I think it's telling how angry some people are getting at the simple idea of looking over our books. And I think that's where we have to start. By the way, we have a wager on how long it'll take Elon Musk to tweet about Doge Watch. I feel like 5 episodes. So Elon, if you're watching, I mean, come on, you know.
Tee us up, baby. Yeah.
Tee us up. Help us out.
Yeah, this is Doge Central.
Yeah,
right?
I love it.
Like, yeah, no, the crazy thing to me, and I think it is such a, like, this should be something that we can all unite on.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is take a step back and realize that we're a country with $37 trillion in debt, running $2 trillion deficits, which equate to 7% of GDP. Okay, when you're running 7% deficits, that is pseudo third world country kind of stuff. I'm not going to say it's full tilt third world country, but it's pseudo. Like you're getting there. And someone is griping. People are up in arms because we're auditing them. Like, think about that, right? Why are they up in arms? There's only 2 reasons why they're up in arms. A, they're hiding something, or B, they are completely ideologically captured and they are not somebody that is a balanced human being and doesn't belong anywhere near power, right?
Those are the only 2 options. It's either so politically captured and so set on Orange Man bad, Elon Musk evil, or you don't want people to see how much money you're doling out to your cronies and allies and the kind of ridiculous stuff that taxpayer money is spent on. So which is it?
I really think that it's the latter, right? And if you think about it, I think it makes perfect sense. If you've spent a career, right? It's weird to call it a career because you've just been manipulating and lying and stealing. But if you've built a career on that type of DC access and those old boy networks, this is really threatening your business model, right? 100%. I mean, and there really are those folks out there that where this is absolutely threatening their business model, and they're going to make noise.
Yeah, well, and if you can take an entity, so the biggest controversy I would say to discuss right now about Doge is around USAID. So if you can take, and Elon Musk believes that you can do this, and the Trump administration, an entity with thousands of people globally on its payroll, and whittle it down to a couple hundred, which is what they think they're going to like, everyone but a couple hundred core people. That should show you that the vast majority of what that entity is doing is either completely unnecessary or the way that they're doing it is just too bureaucratic. So all that, the cuts to USAID in terms of the workforce on hold until the 15th is from the New York Post. Judge pauses Trump effort to cut thousands from USAID's workforce. So this is a federal judge, has stopped the Trump administration from placing thousands of employees at the U.S. Agency for International Development on paid leave Friday, halting plans to cut its workforce down to just a few hundred. The temporary restraining order imposed by Washington, D.C. District Court Judge Carl Nichols will keep any mass personnel moves from taking place until at least February 15th. The judge ordered the Trump administration to reinstate all USAID employees placed on admin leave, barred any additional agency employees from being placed on leave, and ordered that no USAID employees in overseas posts be asked to return to the U.S. on an expedited timeline. How can a judge say you can't fire people who you don't want employed anymore?
Disruptor in chief, Elon Musk, who apparently has adopted the alias, at least he changed his social media handle to Harry Balls, tweeted this morning, "Democracy in America is being destroyed by judicial coup. An activist judge is not a real judge."
I don't think that there's any way that that will last. I mean, bottom line is the president has got that right to my understanding, but the president's got the right to eliminate as much of that workforce as he wants to.
Yeah, and if we've found that it's not necessary to have several thousand employees to carry out the mission of USAID, then who, honest to God, is going to sit and advocate for that? I've got to play this cut that was, so it has a couple things. It's everything wrong with the media and how they're covering Doge and Elon Musk. And look, we're both, I think you and I are both open to not agreeing with some of the things Doge does or Elon Musk. And I've got an example I want to talk about on the show today. But, the way the media is like, they can't see any good in it. Oh no, you want accountability for taxpayer dollars, you evil billionaire man. So Margaret Brennan over at CBS, I'm going to play a good chunk of this clip for people. She interviews a whistleblower. Have you seen this interview yet? Or are you going to hear it for the first time? Oh, that's glorious. Okay, you're going to hear it for the first time. So she interviews this USAID whistleblower, right? And at a time when the media is openly doxing and naming, Doge employees that it thinks are wronging or, unfit or whatever, they give this whistleblower complete anonymity. So don't use their name. They put them in the old, deep throat, blurred in the dark sort of thing. And it's the only point seems to be to allow them to share their personal gripes about Donald Trump and Elon Musk. So here's a clip from the CBS interview that Margaret Brennan did with this whistleblower.
Why in our conversation do you think you need to remain anonymous?
It has been a very hard week. Personally, professionally, as I said, I live in Washington, D.C. Many of my colleagues work in this field. Starting from January 21st, so the first day of the new administration, things started to go sideways very quickly. The atmosphere of fear that was in the USAID building, which we're no longer in, the atmosphere of fear in terms of not knowing who was in the building, not knowing what their motivations were, not knowing if our emails or channels were safe, not knowing how to interpret these executive orders, right, around DEIA or administration priorities. All of that created an atmosphere of massive insecurity. And so people have, I think, lost the ability to know what's true from what's not at this point. Everyone is really scared. And so, I have a daughter, I have a family like most Americans, and I want to be brave. I think it's really important to share our personal stories
but
at this time.
not too brave.
But I am afraid, and I just don't want to put them at any more risk than
Basic courage.
When you say doxed, there is fear of public sharing of your name and possibly targeting.
Absolutely.
By who?
Well, I mean, at this point, Doge members, including Elon Musk, have access to not just the data within the USAID world, right, and the USAID system, which includes my personal email address, my social security number, my entire security file.
Okay, wow, there's a lot. But do you get, I don't know if they manipulated the voice, but I don't even have to see their face to know that's a flaming liberal who hates Donald Trump.
Fire him. Yeah. So what I would say is that anything that made that person feel insecure at their work is probably the right decision.
100. Well, it's like they act like there's this Gestapo that came in and we don't know their motivations. Their motivation is to see if your job is necessary. They've made very clear what their motivation is.
Yeah, you don't know what's true or not. What's true is that he wants to stop wasteful spending and he wants to downsize government agencies. He's been very clear about that. I know what the truth is.
It's literally, he's saying exactly what he wants to do. And if you're that concerned about it, maybe your real concern is that your job is unnecessary.
Well, what they're concerned about is, you see, we're watching democracy dying right in front of our eyes here, Brandi. And, we had a good run with it, but clearly, 250 years of democracy has now gone up in smoke because we're auditing. It's just so bizarre to say, isn't it? This is all about auditing government spending to ensure that they're not lighting our money on fire. And people are somehow, if you don't believe in Trump derangement syndrome, like wait, if I would have gone, I go back in a time machine 30 years, 30 years back, and I go, listen, 30 years from now, there's going to be a president that it's kind of disliked by both parties, right? And he wants to rip down regulations and slash government spending. And everybody's like, that's going to be awesome. And I'm like, oh, wait a second. About half the country is not going to want him to do it. And they're like, no, who would stop? How could you possibly? That's never going to happen. Well, here we are.
Well, I thought it was, I don't know if you saw it. There was this old cut of Elizabeth Warren. I mean, I don't know how old it is, but she looks pretty young in it, where she's essentially complaining about the same things that Trump and Elon Musk and Doge are talking about and actually doing now. Like, oh, we don't know where all this money is going. And so it's complete, like so many things. It's just complete hypocrisy, right? And this notion, it was said by the whistleblower at the end, because what are you blowing the whistle on? First of all, can we also say...
Well, I think truly this is just a whistleblower, like as in someone gave him a whistle and they just stood up and blew it.
It's like a rape whistle where it's really high pitched and it's like just to break people's eardrums. But you know what I mean? Because have you seen, just totally off topic, but have you seen that? Is it the State Farm commercial? Who's the one with Flo? Progressive. It's a progressive commercial, and they have one of the progressive agents in dark. And the interviewer is like, we're here with an insurance whistleblower. And he goes on to say, it's like, oh, did you know there's a tool where you can we can save money on insurance? And the interviewer is like, wait, a whistleblower is supposed to share, like bad, negative stuff. And he's sharing this. So it's funny because you can't be a whistleblower if you're just sharing exactly what Elon Musk is saying publicly that he's doing.
Well, and why were they blurring them out?
It's just crazy. It's insane. I will say the sentiment that whistleblower, I don't know if it's a she or a he, I'm not sure, shared at the end about my personal information. Doge has access to my social security number. You're a federal employee. Yeah. There's a lot of federal agencies and entities that have access to your social security number. It doesn't mean they're going to put it out there.
Well, and listen, like this is like a $9.99. This is like a $9.99 problem a month. Go get LifeLock. Go get Life. I mean, this is just, a major party is in serious disarray when part of their platform is to oppose auditing of federal agencies and stop spending. Like that's where they're at. If you want to know how broken the platform is of the left right now, right? Part of their crusade to save democracy is to prevent wasteful spending cuts.
Exactly.
Talk about the Overton window shifting to a point where like you can't even recognize. I mean, we've just like descended into like a new level of just idiocy. It's like I feel like we're like in level 5 in Dante's Inferno, just going deeper.
It also, I think, shows how infrequently we audit. It always surprised me that this wasn't a regular run-of-the-mill thing to do. I mean, even in state government, where they'll be like, we're going to audit so-and-so. I'm like, aren't you already doing that?
It's insanity. It is insanity. And where you see, this is one of the things you learn in finance, right? There are hallmarks of fraud, right? There's things that you look for. For instance, one of the things that always tips us off is unnecessary complexity, right? Whenever I see something that's relatively simple that looks really opaque, and there's opacity and complexity exists for a reason. They always do, right? In this situation, one of the hallmarks of fraud is the lady doth protest too much. Why are you abstaining against an audit? There is only one reason. There is something you don't want somebody to see. So the fact that you do not want an audit is precisely why we're going to audit you. The other one that's coming up, and you alluded to this, and I personally, the part of it that I am looking forward to the most is when they turn their eye on the Federal Reserve. Okay? And the reason, if most people had an understanding of how insane this was, I think that you'd see marching in the streets, literally. The Federal Reserve, the only body, the only institution on the face of the earth that has the ability to create the world's reserve currency out of thin air, has never been audited. Okay? What do you think the likelihood? Now, I'm not assuming, I'm not accusing the Fed of anything, okay? I'm just asking a simple question here. What do you think the likelihood is that you have this body that is the sole owner or proprietor of the only printing press in the world that can create the world's reserve currency, and they haven't misappropriated or used funds incorrectly.
Yep.
What do you think the odds are?
0.
Because it defies human behavior, right? It defies human nature, right? What concerns me is they could be doing anything. I mean, they could be funneling $200 billion a year to some regime. So we'd never know, literally, and it wouldn't show up in any of the data, right? They can just they've got swap lines set up with central banks, so they could literally push a button and wire $200 billion to some dictator across on the other side of the world for some bizarre reason. You'd never know. You'd never know. The only way to quote unquote even have a finger on what the Fed is doing is that all of the income, virtually all of the income from the Fed is based off of interest payments that they receive off of the bonds that they have already purchased, right? And really the only thing we get to see with the Fed is what the Fed does is they extract all of their costs out of that, right? Out of those interest payments. So they pay all the bills, and whatever is left, they return to the Treasury. So the only type of audit we've got is looking at how much interest income they earned and then how much they spent, right? That's the only metric we've got insight to. Outside it, but I mean, think about that. That metric tells us nothing. Right. So and the other thing is they wouldn't have to use interest income to spend. They can just, like I said, they can just wire it. Right. So I just, which is insane to me, absolutely insane. And they have pushed back against an audit vehemently multiple times. Why?
Right. If you're not doing those things, because you just create all this. In absence of information, people are going to make assumptions about things. I was actually at a libertarian conference in DC over the weekend. I was at LibertyCon, and libertarians hate the Fed. That's like their number one thing is abolish the Fed. So somebody on stage was saying, there's rumors that Elon or Trump, they're going to have Ron Paul audit the Fed. Loudest cheers of the whole conference was the idea of Ron Paul auditing the Fed. And again, like you said, if what you're saying isn't happening, these wild ideas that we're sending all this money to dictators, then fine. Then
great.
Let us audit the Fed.
Yeah, so great.
What's the big deal? It should be totally non-controversial. I have to get to, I think every week we need to talk about our favorite Doge cut, okay?
Okay.
That's going to become a regular part of the show. This week's is obvious. Doge cut a tribute to Anthony Fauci. So apparently there was going to be a Fauci museum exhibit.
Yes, I saw this.
And the cost $168,000. To praise glory to Anthony Fauci, $168,000, and it got doged.
Watch him step in and foot the bill himself.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know, because he already has to foot the bill for his own security because they got rid of his security detail. So money might be tight. But yeah, $168,000 to give a museum exhibit tribute to the work of Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Unbelievable.
That's why Doge exists.
Yes, and that's why I said it's the gift that keeps on giving. I was talking to some friends of mine that I don't want to overstate this, but they have some connections. That they know some people in the administration.
Humble brag.
Well,
I don't
want to overstate it. Like, they don't have a line to Trump or Elon or anything like that.
Gotcha.
Okay, so they're periphery, but the word on the street is that they're really going after this. That this is 100% sincere inside, and they expect prosecutions. Like, people, there have been serious felonies. They said that you're going to hear about more of them, and they're going to name names. And it's all out there in the open, and people are going to go to jail. Are
you talking about NIH, or are you talking about like Fauci's?
Just through this Doge? Yeah, through this Doge process. There are going to be felonies that are handed out over this.
Well, look at some of the things like Sri Lanka climate mitigation coordinator, money for that, money for intercultural communications diversity dialogue. You don't think they're not going to find some fraud, waste, and abuse that amounts to criminal wrongdoing in this?
Well, I mean, there's one glaring one right out of the gate that's fairly small in comparison. What was it? The 36 million that went to the Soros fund to fund.
Yeah.
So somebody made a decision inside the government. Okay, now this is apolitical, meaning that the prosecutors that they are pushing have stated they are not, their goal is to not uphold the Constitution. That's not why these guys are going into office. They're going into office with the stated mission of freeing people, releasing people from jail, period, right? That's one of the number one things. Okay, so we were funding an organization that is bent on undermining our own judicial system. That's sedition. And it's sedition with taxpayer money, which is like a special level of sedition in my book. And whoever did that should absolutely have a felony.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
That's seditious. It's just insane.
Well, you look at, I mean, people went to prison for COVID fraud, which I actually give the government credit for tracking down some of these people. I mean, we'll never see most of the hundreds of millions that got stolen from Washington State's unemployment insurance fund by Nigerian scammers, because we fell for the oldest scam in the book, like I'm a Nigerian prince and I'm unemployed.
Inslee found a way to fix the budget gap.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, I'm surprised he didn't have a news conference. He's like, hey, an uncle from Zambia just called me and let me know that, hey, Washington, we're back in the black, baby.
Yeah, 100%. They just said all I had to do is wire them $500 billion and then they'd give us the $14 billion back. And they haven't done it yet, but like, he's a Nigerian prince, so I don't think he's lying about that. But yeah, I mean, people are prosecuted for fraud, not as much as they should be, but it happens. I mean, you look at all the, like I said, COVID fraud. The FBI was showing up at people's doors to arrest them for COVID fraud, as they should. So certainly, I mean, even at a state level in Washington State, we've had criminal prosecutions of, again, not as many as there should be, of individuals who laundered money that were given grants to deal with homelessness or crime or whatever it is. So people who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing with the money that was given to them, as stupid as that fund allocation was, if they really mean it, it has to end in criminal prosecutions, because there's no way there's that much waste, fraud, and abuse without criminal prosecutions.
Yeah, you can't, right? Like you can't unfire that gun. And then the other thing is you're seeing the money being used to really push the very worst parts of who we are as a country around the world too.
Yep, the DEI, the radical gender ideology. It's like, instead of, let's spread the glory of democracy and freedom and all these things, it's like, no, let's go over there and help them pay for a trans story hour in some country that doesn't want it. That's crazy. No,
it's atrocious. But what is really exciting to me, the thing that I think is most positive, is that you have people like, for instance, funny enough, I had an interesting back and forth on Twitter actually regarding your show. So there was a progressive that must be a regular troller of yours.
Oh, I saw this back and forth. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, but this is what you're doing. And I don't want to get off the Doge topic, but I just feel like this is a perfect example of what we're dealing with. So I was having this argument back and forth with this woman where her logic was, it is discrimination that people under the age of consent can get breast reductions, but we don't want sex change operations. Like, what's the difference? And I said to her, I go, let me get this straight. You're conflating a breast reduction to a permanent medical sterilization.
Mm-hmm. Same
and
thing.
I was like, and I just said, you know what? You've said more here than you can. Like, that says it all. Yeah. I got nothing to add to this.
Yeah, right? You've proven why your position is so insane.
Yeah, and the problem with that, right, is what we're running into with Doge is when you're that, whatever that is. I don't know what that is. Is it philosophically, ideologically captured? Is it just lack of horsepower? I don't know what it is, but that's the issue that we're running into with Doge, right? Which is we're going to just have to get used to taking these bullets on the run, because those people are never going to be convinced. Like, they're so married to their ideology, they truly will go down with the ship. You know what I mean? And there's just no saving those folks.
Yeah, it's like so with so many things. If the role was reversed and they were looking into Trump spending on XYZ, it would be gung-ho, let's do it. Every penny needs to be accounted for, whatever it is. But because it's one side doing it and it's going to be popular, that's the other thing, is they know it's popular with the American people, and so they're trying like hell to find fault with it. And it's the same reason, I think, why they've moved off the media and others criticizing Trump. And now a lot of that criticism is going to Elon Musk, because they're like, Donald Trump appears to be Teflon right now. People love him. I mean, he's at the Super Bowl getting cheered and Taylor Swift is getting booed. So like, let's just try, that's not working, so let's try Elon Musk. And they're going with this narrative of he's an unelected billionaire who's been given all this power. You do realize that most people in the federal government are unelected. Most people who are determining what we do and where money goes or doesn't go are unelected.
The head of the Federal Reserve is unelected.
Yeah, but because it's Elon Musk, I mean, it's throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. One thing I saw floating around this week that I'm not really sold on, or I'm not angry to the extent I think a lot of people are. So there's all this money being spent by the federal government on news subscriptions. So like to the tune of millions of dollars spent on subscriptions to Politico, to the Associated Press, to the New York Times. And so those line items are being pulled out as like, oh my gosh, the government's essentially funding these media organizations. I'm not as outraged about that, because if you're spending, let's say you're the Department of Justice, and you've got subscriptions to the New York Times and AP for your employees or whatever it is, or for some employees, like if stuff's behind a paywall, that doesn't bother me, because I mean, I guess I don't get it, because if you're the government and you want to follow and track media outlets behind a paywall that are covering your entity or the government, what other way is there to get that information besides pay for a subscription to it?
Yeah, I mean, if I was king for a day, I would probably say I would probably cut it. But I'm the same. I'm the same with you. I don't think it's I mean, look, there's a lot of jobs there that have to have media access to media stuff, right? I do not find. Do I like the idea of that money going to those institutions? No. And I bet you if we looked under the hood as it relates to those businesses, I bet it's not an insignificant sum to them. That bothers me a little, because we are, you're backdoor funding jokes of institutions that don't really serve a purpose in media any longer. But I'm with you. I don't like, and the scale of it, I think, kind of gets out of hand, right? Like, so millions of dollars. You're like, okay, guys, there's 4 million employees in the federal government, right? And millions of contractors. So yeah, I don't have as big an issue there.
Yeah, it has to be reasonable, right? Because like for one, I think the Associated Press, Department of State spent $542,000. I don't think you need $542,000 worth of subscription. So like, I'm not okay. If you're in the media office of the Pentagon or something, your job entails dealing with the press. And yeah, of course you need a subscription to the Associated Press and to all these entities. Right. But there are certainly examples of like, how many subscriptions did you buy? How many do you actually need? It doesn't have to be just a blanket. All of our employees are going to have subscriptions to the New York Times. So as long as it's necessary for the job that you have with the federal government, I don't have a problem with that. I'd rather you pay for it than news agencies give you a freebie, because then 100%. That's a weird thing too. But for instance, there was also this going on in Washington State as well, where so Doge, puts all that out there. Our friend Ari Hoffman over at KVI, he started looking at Washington State spending, and he saw that state government is spending $102,000 a year on Seattle Times subscriptions. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm sure there are some lawmakers or caucuses that have subscriptions to unDivided, and like they pay for it with taxpayer funds. Like if that's the decision they make and it's an expense that whatever, $102,000, I can't decide if I think that's too much or not. $102,000 across state government for subscriptions to the Seattle Times.
I'll put it in the same category you did. Do I like it? No. Do I look at that and think there's almost guaranteed a way? Like, for instance, could you get a group deal and probably get that discounted a lot? Yeah. You'd think so, right? At the same time, $102,000 is a lot of money, but that does fall. That to me, this kind of spending to me falls in a different category. Right. Like, I think we should look at it, but this to me is not egregious on the face of it. You know what I mean?
I divided it. So $102,000, there's a couple different Seattle Times subscriptions you can get. Average is about $5 a month, right? For delivery. So that would mean you have 20,400 government subscriptions to the Seattle Times, which actually does sound like a lot.
That sounds like a lot. I would love to see what their books look like without that 106,000.
Yeah, I don't think 103,000 roughly is make or break for the Times, but I don't think it hurts either.
Well, it's got to be their biggest subscribing body, though.
Oh, per company, for sure.
Yeah. And so my point is that's not an immaterial amount of money.
Yeah.
It's enough. If you're $100,000 client, essentially, for a newspaper, they're going to pick up the phone when you call. And they would anyway. I mean, you're in the state government, but it's interesting. And the other thing that I love about this is the attitude, right? It's getting I mean, Ari's super sharp. He was going to look up that stuff anyway.
Yeah.
But it's getting these conversations to be had, right? I've been having conversations with my kids about wasteful spending. And, it was a topic. We had a Super Bowl party yesterday. Everybody was talking about that. And it makes people aware. And people, then you hear, oh, well, that's not that much money. And you go, wait a second. If you break some of these amounts, like the $40 billion, right, that they spent on on charging stations, that they've got 8 completed. And their big brag was, yeah, but that's not fair. We've got 1,300 in process. And I'm looking at them going, give me 20 billion. And I guarantee I could have had at least 5,000 done by now.
Yeah.
I don't know what it entails to build them, but I've seen them. Pretty sure I could have significantly more than that done. And I'd even cut them a break. I'd do it for a simple 20 billion, because I'm a giver, right?
Nice guy.
But no, the pushback against that, it's just, I love the momentum that I'm seeing. I love that it's sparking these conversations. I love that people are waking up to the waste. And like I said, that, people are like, oh, 40 billion doesn't sound much compared to like a $2 trillion annual deficit, but divide $40 billion, right? Divide it by 330 million people.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know what the number is, but it's like $120. How many people out there would sit there and go, you know what? That's offensive to me.
Mm-hmm.
That $120, that was a dinner out with my kids. That was a night of, I was listening to Mark Andreessen talk about it this weekend, right? It's a night of childcare that you can go out with your wife, right? And this is the well, it's only 40 billion. You're like, you guys are so only 40 billion.
Not your
right?
money. It's not your money.
Right. It's not your money. And $120 outside of DC is an amount of money that matters to people. And this is, if you want to know how you get deficits that are running 7% of GDP, it's that attitude.
100%.
Right?
And all of it adds up. We're going to talk about pennies in a second, but all of that adds up to major cuts if you get rid of it. Just a correction. So the $102,000 spent on the Seattle Times subscriptions is over 2 years. So the 2023-2025 biennium, how many state workers, Nicole?
128,000.
128,000 full-time? I didn't know it was that many.
Wow.
We need Doge in Washington State to cut down the number of workforce. One interesting thing I saw with those Times subscription, the single biggest buyer of those subscriptions for state agencies is the Department of Ecology, which deals with environmental issues. Interesting that the Seattle Times has the Climate Lab. So I do find that a little bit suspicious. I don't know if they're giving all those guys a subscription at Ecology or what, but all right, let's end with this. Dumb or good? I guess those can't be the only two options. Necessary or unnecessary? Donald Trump says that he's asked the U.S. Treasury to stop minting new pennies, the humble penny. Do away with it or no?
I think it makes sense. I mean, it's not. Does it make a meaningful amount of? No, but these little things add up, and I just don't see. I don't see any purpose for it. It's kind of wild if you think about it that they're minting new pennies every year.
He says it costs them 2 cents to mint 1 cent.
I would not be surprised at all. We actually we looked into this. One of my employees did a study on nickels a long time ago, and there was an arbitrage. I don't know if it still exists due to the price of nickel. I believe it would. It has to. But that is true for most of the smaller coins. So like even nickels. If you were to like there was an arbitrage, and we couldn't really figure out a way to take advantage of it. But there was about at one point, and I want to say like 6.8 to 7 cents worth of metal in a nickel, and so there was an arbitrage opportunity there. I don't know what that is. I'm almost positive that the metal price trades at a premium to nickel still. But yeah, that would not shock me at all. I mean, you've got copper at $4.50 a ton. Yeah, that penny would have to be worth more than a penny.
Yeah, I just Googled that because can I say this is embarrassing? I didn't know a nickel was made of nickel.
Yeah. What do you think it was made of?
I just thought they called it a nickel because that was like a phrase for 5 cents, but apparently it's 75% copper and 25% nickel.
Oh, wow.
What? Why are you laughing at me? I didn't know. I'm okay admitting that, Nicole.
I think at one point it was made out of silver, though. I think.
I don't know. Well, it says there was a war on nickels. There were wartime nickels that were made with something else because of the war from 1942 to 1945. So I don't know. I'm not going to look up the whole history of nickels right now. I'll just say I didn't know a nickel had nickel in it.
Why do you have to say it like that? Why is it bad to look up the whole history of nickels? I think we could do like a 5-hour show on nickels.
We could, but I mean, I'm not going to be able to do it right now and speak with it on any authority. For next week's Doge report, I'll investigate what nickels have been made out of at different times and how much it costs to make a nickel.
It was so during World War II. You were right. They actually made some nickel. They made nickels out of silver for a period of time. And must have been they had a demand for nickel in some kind of military, purpose or something.
That makes
like
sense. That makes sense. All right.
So you weren't totally wrong. You weren't. At one point, they were made of silver.
I'm blonde. What is it? I don't know. What do you want from me? I don't know everything. I have a lot of information in this noggin, but the makeup of a nickel isn't one of them. All right. Doge Watch week 1. So we're still bullish on Doge.
100%. And
I agree.
I got it. Early reviews, I think, are going better than I would have planned. So I'm loving it.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see how long the show exists. I mean, Democrats are losing their minds. So if Doge goes away, I don't know what we'll do. We'll just call it, I think I said this, the show formerly known as Doge Watch.
Yeah.
But I think it's here to stay. I think it's here to stay. So, all right, Zach Abraham, we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks for having me.